Hey guys, so just to start off, first thing is apologies for the voice and for any cuts in this video where I've had to stop to cough. And the second one is thank those people who've been very kind with their kind words of support and encouragement and nice things and advice. Always lots of people with good advice, so thank you for all that. So just a few things. It seems lots of you guys already had COVID, so you know about the actual experience of having it. That's not really what this video is about. This video is more about what it's like to have it in Japan. So, just broadly first though, I exercise about 12 to 14 hours a week usually, fairly good paced exercise at the dojo and also outside the dojo. And as a result of that, despite me being a big fat old man, my lungs were pretty healthy and had pretty good capacity when I caught this thing. So I just wanted to say this because it's been really on my mind. When it got at its worst, I could feel it across the top of my lungs, and it was really congested, and it was a bit hard to breathe, and it was really scary because when you've heard all the stories about the ventilators and things, you know, and you could just feel it getting that way where it was getting heavy. But fortunately, because my lungs were in pretty good condition when it started, I still had pretty good capacity, so I could sort of breathe past it all and still get pretty good breaths. So that was my first observation, and I'm just mentioning it because just, you know, any of you guys who are worried about catching this thing, you know, you hear all the time that they say keep yourself in good condition, you know, in case you catch this, and you can see that could be really true. The other one is I'm guessing that if I hadn't been vaccinated 2 times, that it probably would be worse than it was, you know. So, you know, and again, there's a whole range of people's opinions on this topic, isn't there? But just as somebody who's just in sort of getting towards the end of experiencing this, I just wanted to explain to you those things that keep coming to my mind, that I'm really glad that I could keep breathing through the whole thing and that it didn't get too bad. A couple of days ago, I did get to the point where I was like that close to going to the hospital because I was thinking, oh, this is getting scary, you know. But I was still okay. I could still take deep breaths and still get enough oxygen and didn't get the complications from that. So that's just one observation. Healthy lungs sure does help, you know. 10, 15 years ago, when I was a heavy smoker, I wouldn't have liked to have experienced that same thing on Wednesday because I think it would have been a different game altogether. So that's just that. Just had to mention that because that just might be a helpful bit of information for somebody. The next thing was, oh yeah, the booster thing. So I got a letter from the city 6 weeks ago. No, wait a minute. A few months ago, right? I got a letter from the city and it said, you can book your booster shot, right? And then it said in there, lots of paper. Always when they communicate with you about anything here, it's always lots of paper. They can't just make it, you know, one real clear explanation. It's always going to be lots of paper and an A4 and an A3 and or A5 or B5 and all these different size pieces of paper, different colours and different information. And it's sort of like Japanese thinking is that means they're being thorough. If they send you lots of stuff and it looks like lots of stuff, you open the envelope, there's all these pages, and usually I sit there with my wife and say, do we need that? No, throw that away, and most of it goes in the bin because most of it's just either repeats of something else or stuff we already know or stuff that's bleeding obvious or something. But it's just the way they do things. So this envelope turned up with pages of stuff and it said you can book your booster. And then on one piece of information it said you can only get the booster after 8 months from your vaccination. So after you had your second vaccination, 8 months later you can have your booster, not before 8 months. And then on another piece of paper it said 6 months, and so we actually sat there with this 6 months and 8 months thing. So which is right, you know? If I book it for 6 months, turn up at the clinic, are they going to go, oh, you're too early and send me home? So I booked it for 8 months, right? I booked it for 8 months, which is actually, interestingly, next week. Right? It's next week is the 8 months from my second vaccination shot, right? So Okay, so I booked mine, and then a couple of days later, hers turned up, and she had the same lots of paper, but the one that said 8 months wasn't there. There was only the one that said 6 months. So she said, oh, that's cool. So she booked hers, and that means that she already had hers, right? Over about a month ago. She had her booster, right? So interestingly, so the first point is, this is typical of how Japanese organisations and the government give you information. Usually is too much of it, it's ambiguous, and that quite often people get to the end of looking through the information and say, yoko karane, don't really know. Because it's all ambiguous, it's not clear, it's you know, mixed messages, it's all sorts of stuff. So that's typical, that's the first point. And then the interesting thing was that she got her booster about a month ago. I didn't until, I'm not getting mine until next week. And it seems, I mean, you never can be sure with these things, can you? But it seems that I've brought this thing home. I've brought COVID home from somewhere. Because just guessing, because I had symptoms first. It doesn't mean it was me, but, you know, it seems like it. So I had symptoms first, I had the cough. And it was a couple of days later, both my kids got it, right? And they started coughing as well. So, so interesting that the point of that is, isn't it interesting? She still hasn't got it. So we've all had it. It's been in the house for the last 10 days, and she hasn't caught it. So, and as you'll see shortly in the story, it's quite surprising, really. But the only difference between us all, I mean, I'm actually healthier than her usually. Fitter anyway, so it's hard to see any other reason why she wouldn't have got it except for the booster. I mean, these things are always more complicated than that, aren't they? But it just looks that way, that the booster has stopped her from getting it, which makes you wonder if I'd had my booster at 6 months, if none of us would be sick right now, you know. But I mean, it doesn't really matter, but they're just observations, right? So yeah, okay, so the sort of the points are, it was interesting that I got the cough, and then I started to go into my chest, and I could feel it, and I knew what it was. I knew what it was, because usually I don't get influenza. If I get a cold, usually it's a sniff and a bit of a cough, and it doesn't stop me doing anything, you know. And I never have time off work, usually, because those sorts of things just don't slow me down at all, you know. And I started to get that, and then I started to get a fever, a slight fever, and I never get a fever, you know, unless I'm really, really sick. So I was like, nah, I knew what it was straight away. And I told her, I said to her, when I started to cough, I said to her, keep the kids away from me, all of you stay away from me, and, you know, keep your distance. And in the old house we can, right? I'm in another building at the moment in the old house, so that's one good thing about the old house, we've got huge spaces. So that space you saw me in a couple of days ago where I was sitting at my desk, you know, I can stay in that space on my own, and nobody's within 20 metres of me, you know, they're all in other rooms at the other end of the house. So I said, we'll do that, just stay away from me, you know, because I've got this cough. And I suspected it was what it was, but I knew, if I said COVID, I knew the whole atmosphere would change, right? And we'd go into panic mode, right? I knew that would happen. And so I didn't say anything about that first, and I didn't know for sure anyway, but I was just saying, just stay away from me. So I did that for a couple of days, and then, yeah, the kids started to get sick too. So she took them off to the doctor. And it was really interesting, and this is, I don't want this to be about us. It's about the experience of having COVID in Japan, right? And this was really interesting. The whole thing changed immediately. She took the kids to the doctor, they got the COVID test, it's COVID. And straight away it changed. The doctor's surgery gave her a big pile of paper, right, with lots of ambiguous information, you know, and she came home with this big pile of paper, and the whole attitude changed. And you see this with Japanese people, that if there's a situation like that, that's a hive situation, so usually anything in our house, we sort of decide it between us. You know, like we talk about stuff, you know, what are we going to do about this, and we talk about stuff, and we work out what we're going to do and how we're going to go about it. But when you get things that involve the hive, when you get things that involve society, your individual thinking is just pushed aside, and your opinion or your thoughts or discussion or anything like that is just pushed aside. And she came home with all this information and basically read it to me. This is what we have to do. You can't do this. You have to do this. You can't do that. You have to do this. And there was a real feeling of panic. And what it is what it is when you get things like this, there's a real concern about how we're perceived by other people. And of course, all of us are worried if we get COVID, our concern is our health, the health of our family, right? And then giving it to other people. Of course, no decent person wants to give it to other people, right? We all would be really concerned about that, wouldn't we? And we'd be careful, right? Which is why we do the alcohol thing and the mask thing and everything, and take care, but not to catch it and give it to other people. Of course, right? That's just a decent human thing, right? But there's a different level to it in Japanese thinking, and you can hear it when they talk about it. There's this thing about what's the right thing to do and what other, they don't say what other people would think of us, but you can tell by the adjectives they use and the way they speak that that's their concern, and it's justified because some of you might remember when a couple of years ago talking about COVID, that people were getting bullied when it first came to Japan, and some people were getting sick, and it was pretty rare. Like in this district, there was like one family that had it, and they were getting harassed. There was people throwing rocks at their house, and there was people driving past yelling out to them and all this sort of stuff. And they eventually went somewhere else. They took they packed up their suitcases and went somewhere else to get away because they were getting harassed. And we started to see posters in the dojo and other public buildings. They were putting up posters saying, don't harass COVID patients, right? Isn't that amazing? But it's not really surprising when you know what Japanese culture is like, and they talk about bullying here all the time, and bullying is a big part of Japanese culture. And we made videos about this before too. To force people to conform, right? To force people to conform and do the right thing, and anybody who's slightly different in any way has a chance of being bullied and harassed, right? And so for them it's sort of normal, and the line between sort of making people do what they're supposed to do and bullying is just grey. It's the same as the senpai kohei thing at school and all that sort of stuff. We talked about this before, and so there is this sort of and a lot of it's really subtle. A lot of it's really subtle. It's not standing outside throwing rocks at your house necessarily, but it's just like, and the other thing is, keep in mind too, Japanese people are obsessed with germ phobia, right? They've all got germ phobia. Normally, before COVID came, they're always been, right? They've always been obsessed with germs and cleanliness. So the idea that somebody has COVID is just like, and so there is this social stigma attached to it. And you could see the whole atmosphere changed. It went from us being sick and doing the logical things, we're wearing masks, we're doing all the stuff, alcohol, keeping everything clean, we had the kids in other rooms and we were being really careful. It was all under control, it was all cool. And then as soon as it got labelled COVID, she's come home in a panic. And it was like, oh, don't go outside and don't go outside and don't do this. And then keep in mind, we had a huge garden, right? So going outside in the sun, in the garden is a healthy thing to do. But oh, no. And you could see there was this real obsession. I actually had a conversation with her at one stage, and she got up and closed the window, and I had the windows open in the middle of the day. It's been beautiful weather, 21 degrees. And she got up and closed the window, and I said, why are you closing the window? Oh, because of the neighbours, right? And the neighbours are a good distance away on that side of the house. But she was concerned that they'd hear us talking about it, right? So there's that one aspect to it, the stigma attached to it, that other people, know that we've got it and that, we're bad, which is sort of, it's less than it used to be, because I think now everybody here knows somebody who's had it. I mean, we know a few people who've had it, family members and friends and business people we know, and different people we know who've had it. Lots of you guys have had it. We've seen that in the last couple of days in those comments. So the stigma's down a little bit in Japan, but obviously not enough. That there's still this sort of irrational sort of behaviour, irrational sort of reaction to it. Not terribly surprising when you know what Japanese people are like. It's not terribly surprising. So as soon as it was labelled COVID, all the logic and reason and science that we've been applying to there all went out the window, and everything got this. We had this list of do's and don'ts, and this obsession with following the rules and the manner, and all of a sudden other people's opinions, like family members, you know, in-laws and all these different family members, long conversations. Phone call came from the health centre, the city health centre, which is a part of City Hall, and a big long discussion with some clown at the health centre all about it, which, you know, big long explanation about it, and you could hear it went on and on and on and on, you know, and then big long conversations with the in-laws about what the right thing to do and the wrong thing. And it's this whole hive thing. I mean, you can simplify down what you've got to do in the case of COVID in the family. You could simplify it down to half a dozen things, couldn't you? You know, about cleanliness things and masks and you know, drink lots of water and all those do's and don'ts. You could, short list, isn't it? It doesn't need 30 minutes on the phone to the health centre and hours on the phone to relatives talking about it. What should we do? What about this? And it's sort of going for consensus. It's and what my thinking on the topic sort of went out the window, because it didn't really matter, because now it's a community thing, it's a social thing, society thing, and what the consensus of society was became more important. You know, it's all these big long conversations with these family members and close friends and family members, not distant people, of course, because that'd be embarrassing, but close family members and friends, you know, big long discussions about it. And so, none of it's really surprising, but it is disappointing, because like, when you're in the middle of it, you know, you can't escape from it, and you're sort of stuck here. Yeah, into automatic robot mode. I made a little list of things here I wanted to remember. And that you see this with other things. I'm trying to think what the other example was. We've had situations like this before, where you get something that, when the kids, in the past, where the kids have had a temperature at school, and it was just a temperature, because, you know, kids get sick sometimes, but it was during the COVID thing, so straight away this same robot panic mode checks in, and you've got to sort of do all these things and know all science and logic. For example, I'm not going to go into the small details, because everybody has different opinions. Some of you guys would think her thinking was better, and the group thinking is better, and some, you know, everyone have a different opinion. But just as one small example of a different sort of thinking, my thinking is, if I've got COVID and the kids have got COVID, it makes sense for me to look after them, and for the mother who doesn't have COVID to stay away and not get it, was my thinking. Her thinking was, if two people who have COVID hang out together, that their COVID will get worse, right? And she had big discussions with the other family members about that, and they all agreed. Right? Some of you guys might agree too, but my thinking is that, you know, if I've got COVID, I'm wearing a mask, the kid's wearing a mask, and I'm looking after the kid, that makes more sense than a person who's not sick looking after the kid. But anyway, that's just one small example, but there's been a lot of that. There's been a lot of that craziness going on. My advice is, if you find yourself married to a Japanese person in a situation like that, just go with it. Go, okay, whatever. Because you can't compete with that hive thing. You know, we've talked about this on previous videos about other topics. If the hive agree on something, there's nothing. I could show her things from the CDC and from Mayo Clinic and from Oxford University and places around the world saying different things. We're going to talk about isolation, and, you know, I could show her all these things from all around the world, but it wouldn't make any difference. If the health department, now it could be just some low-level public servant guy sitting at a desk in at the City Hall, if he says something, he's sensei, right? And irrelevant to whether he knows what he's talking about or not, his job is working at the health centre, so he's the sensei. And so if he says something, and all the close family members and friends agree with it, that's it. And it doesn't matter what Mayo Clinic or CDC or WHO or Oxford University or anybody else, it doesn't matter what they say. You know, if the little guy sitting at the counter, the 23-year-old guy at the counter at the health centre says something, he's sensei, we do what he says. No logical reasoning is required. Yeah, double corona. I wrote 2 people with corona equals double corona. That's the thinking. One person has corona, another person has corona. You get together, you get double corona. Right. And I actually said, so your thinking is, if I've got it and she's got it and we spend time together, that it'll get worse? And she said, yes. I said, we're both wearing masks, we're both, alcohol and everything, we're just in the same room, right? Yes. Okay. That's her thinking. So, okay, that's fine. So I went and made another video and watched some videos. Lots of talking on the phone, the healthcare, yeah. Oh, the writing stuff down. So the little guy at the health centre said you've got to write everything down. So at the moment, it's all about reading these multiple pieces of paper with all their advice and writing everything down. Everything's getting recorded. The temperatures at different times of day and all these sorts of things, which, okay, there's probably some benefit in that. I mean, I'm just interested in the big picture. What I saw was the kids' temperatures went up to like 39 and a half, and now they're back down to about 37. One of them's normal, 36.5 or something. So that's all I'm interested in. Obviously they're through the worst of it. I feel like I am too. I think what I've got at the moment is that healing thing, when you've had a bad chest thing and then you get that bit at the end where it's sort of clearing itself up. That's what I feel like now. But look, just before I go, I've only got a couple minutes left. Just before I go, I can't work. Oh, we didn't get to the isolation thing. The isolation thing. Some countries at the moment, if you test negative, you're free. Some countries at the moment, 5 days isolation or something. These guys, it's 10. And then you've got to get tested and there's all sorts of complications. So it's a bit of a pain. So I'm stuck at home, still can't go to work. The bills are still coming because it's April. So the school fees and the health insurance and what's the other one, the pensions and all these other bills are all turning up. So just quickly, a couple of people have stepped up on Patreon, have stepped up their support, and a couple of people have supported through PayPal as well. Supported the channel so we keep making videos from our deathbeds. So, but just to you guys, it really is encouraging. First of all, logistically, it's helped actually pay. I took down 2 bills off the cork board and paid them because you guys, and also it's just encouraging. When it's been a pretty tough week for a whole heap of reasons, as you can sort of see. But that encouragement's been really, really positive and really good, so I really appreciate that. But just one quick thing, the other people out there who aren't on Patreon or PayPal yet, if you like what we're doing with the videos and you want us to keep doing it, I can't go to work at the moment. If I don't go to work, I don't get paid, I don't get sick pay, I don't get holiday pay, so it's a pretty bad situation. So, looking at it from a positive point of view, I'm going to try and spend more time making videos this week. So if you like what we're doing, you want us to do more of it, please, Patreon and PayPal, the links underneath this video. So time's ticking down. It's the camera, guys. This particular camera I can record for 28 minutes. Also, I'm running out of voice. So the last video, the one yesterday about the building the house next door, when I narrated it, I had to speak pretty quietly because I kept making me cough. And every time I was about to cough, I'd pause the video and I'd cough, and then I'd start recording again and I'd do a bit more narration and I'd pause it again. It was only a 7-minute video, wasn't it? It took me about 20 minutes or something to narrate it because I kept having to pause it and wait and cough and catch myself and then go again. So this one I managed to get through it much better. It was good. I'm improving, guys. We'll live through it. We'll live through it. It's not so bad. Having had the vaccination and having started off in good condition, it wasn't so bad. It wasn't so bad. It was pretty scary watching the kids. That's the most horrible bit, of course, watching their temperatures go up. It's scary stuff, isn't it? Those of you who are parents will relate to that. I check it. She's following the instructions how often you should take the temperature. When they were up at 39, I was taking their temperature every 30 minutes, because it's scary, that, isn't it? But they're looking like through the worst of it too, so it's going to be alright. It's going to be alright. Anyway, thanks again. PayPal, Patreon. More videos coming soon.